So thanks very much for joining, everybody. So the 5 generic sustainability strategies is what we're gonna talk about today. Ronnie's on clicker and there's sometimes a delay.
Yeah, I'm on it. So a little bit about us. So yeah, we're Sustainable X. We're a business-led company that believes that businesses can be sustainable and profitable at the same time, or even improve their profitability by being sustainable. So a little bit about myself. I have an accent because I'm from Australia. Formerly a chartered accountant, but I spent most of my career in supply chain and manufacturing companies.
I'm also in the Accented Club from Northern Ireland originally, and my background's really been in SME businesses in the UK, and particularly in the construction and utility sectors. So the purpose of today is to introduce those big 5 strategies that pretty much any company could pigeonhole themselves within, and actually look at the pros and cons of each of those, and then start to think, and hopefully you can get from it an idea of where you are and what strategy you would like to adopt going forward if you don't already have one in place. And therefore you've got that progression roadmap in terms of how you're going to tackle sustainability as a thing.
So today we're going to just very briefly, it's a real whistle-stop tour here, but just talk about the sustainability definition, just a quick refresh and what we think it is, the 5 strategies, just a brief overview, and then dig into some examples. And we've done a desktop review. There's no right or wrong. It's not a name and shame, but just look at some different companies that you may or may not recognize and where they are in the continuum. And yeah, and 1 slide or 2 slides right at the end, a little bit more about us.
Okay, so the definition of sustainability, and the first point is you have to be in business. So it's that enduring profitability piece that you're carrying on, making money. Even if you're a charity, you're bringing money in and sustaining as a business. But our definition that we like from a business perspective is that you actually do well from doing good. So if you're doing good things, that you actually get a benefit from doing it. So we've built our business sustainability model on the back of expanding on the basic principles. So you think of environmental as the natural place to start, but there's also social and economic. And you'll see various models knocking around. The investors market talks about ESG, there's the UN Sustainable Development Goals, but they all have a broad spectrum. They're looking at health and well-being, they're looking at gender equality, ethnic diversity, equal opportunities, and governance is increasingly a big thing.
They also cover supply chain. It's a huge topic in terms of the environmental impact. 80% they're saying of carbon emissions come throughout supply chains. So big push in that area. Innovation, we love to talk about that, but collaboration, you can't be sustainable without partners, customers, suppliers, employers, employees. So it's a lot about partnerships. Also bringing value to the customers and understanding your market. So that's a lot of the commercial aspect and innovation. And also how you are as a company in terms of your community contribution, your community employment, who you employ and what you give back into your community.
So as I mentioned, these things map across to other models, and what's most appropriate for your business will vary depending on your sector and your structure and your size, but they all are mapped across well. So the 5 strategies, and we're not going to keep you in suspense, we'll give you the overview straight away. So lip service, where you're doing just enough. Me too, where you're following the market or customers and doing what everybody else is doing, tried and tested. Isolation is quite an interesting piece where you effectively have some area of your business or a range of products that are environmentally friendly. Commitment, you're doing it, you are measuring, you're publishing, you're sharing with people what you're trying to do, how you're getting on, the ups and downs on the way. And the big bold one is transformation, where you are going for it, you are trying to change your market to be really sustainable, and that's a big play. So we kick off with the lip service, which really is trying to get away with business as usual. Where you have to comply, you're doing it. So you're doing just enough. You try and avoid getting in trouble for not doing much. And you try and distract people with, when you do anything good at all, you make a big noise about it and you put those stories out there to give them the impression that you're doing it. So just to kick off the examples, and we're going to use 3 different sectors consistently through this. And when you're naming and shaming people that are doing lip service, it's easy to pick on someone who's gone bust, as in this case. And interesting with Carillion, so with governance being one of the big pillars of sustainability, they were receiving awards for their governance right up to when they went bust. So clearly there has to have been a lot of lip service going in there. They're telling people what they want to hear, but underneath the bonnet, it clearly wasn't happening, and there was a lot wrong there. So that would make you challenge any claim they ever made. Was there really any genuine content behind it?
So one of the other sectors we've picked up is retail or FMCG. And at this point, I've picked Primark as a good example. It is not a characteristic of lip service is that it is something you compete on or you use as a competitive advantage. Primark definitely doesn't. They're in fast fashion. It's cheap. It's cheerful. It's mass market, and it really is an interesting time because they are trying to show a few things that they do, and something I found on their website was really strong to a point is they actually disclose all the manufacturers around the world, and they record some key statistics around that. Disappointingly, it was only gender. They only sort of broke down a gender diversity of their suppliers, rather than perhaps something that's more important, like salaries or or cotton use in the industry. And also sometimes they often, as Nick mentioned, they use distraction techniques. So you'll see in Primark, they'll use bins for collecting food. So it gives the impression that they're doing a lot, but a lot of these bins are only 1% of the clothes that are taken from there can actually be recycled. So it's a big distraction, and they fall firmly into the lip service category. In terms of the energy sector, which is the 3rd sector we've picked on to continue in the theme, Shell has released its information, and they've declared, which is carbon neutrality by 2070, which is a number that's not really heard. Everyone's talking 2020 or 2050, and that definitely doesn't meet the UN guidelines for our 1.5% reduction in carbon emissions. They've also bought over a new energy service, and they're claiming that it's 100% renewable. But when you just lift up the bonnet, as Nick said earlier, you find that that's just carbon offsetting. So they buy carbon certificates against that. So once again, fall into the lip service strategy.
So in terms of pros and cons of this,
the negatives,
go on, Rondi.
You go, Nick.
In terms of the positives on this,
so yeah, pros and cons.
I'm going. In terms of the upfront effort, there's not much required, and clearly there's some short-term cost advantages to this because you're not having to do anything; you're just doing the absolute basics on it.
Yeah, but negatives is it's a lot of trust erosion. You can lose market share if the market's shifting and consumer demand, and we see consumers demanding improving. Yeah, it's not perhaps a perfect long-term strategy. And also investors are becoming more and more ESG focused. So if you're not paying more attention than just lip service, you might reduce your investor interest.
Okay, so Me Too is actually you're starting to make a little bit of progress. So and probably most businesses, the vast majority of businesses are in this space. So they're recognizing they have impacts and they are responsible for them, and they're making some changes in a positive direction. And they're really driven by that from the customer side of things. But they are following the pack. They're reacting to what other people are doing competitively, and they're reacting what the customers are asking them. And they are still shying away from any real accountability. You won't see any information being published. They're not putting it out there and recording where they are. So in the construction example, I've picked on a specific company, but there's vast numbers of businesses in this space, and they have out there, we're committed to this, we're committed to recycling, we're committed to resourcing ethically, we're committed to lower carbon, and we've got this policy and that policy and the other policy, and you won't see any measurements. That's not to say they haven't got them, maybe they're just not talking about it. Certainly in this example, we just couldn't see it, but they're big on policy and short on measurement and real substance.
So FMCG, I looked at Colgate Palmolive. One of the key things here is the plastic toothbrushes. Every single plastic toothbrush we've ever used is still somewhere on the planet. And they are copying, they are following the pack, they are moving, and they have some transparency in terms of issuing a bamboo product range. But it is all a little bit, it is a bit weak here. No measures, no ambition, and they're talking about things like vegan toothbrushes and sugar-free toothbrushes, and no real mention of plastic. So it's quite light. In terms of another Me Too would be ExxonMobil. They are constantly ranked the highest oil and gas provider for global emissions, so that's right at the wrong end of the scale. But they have promised to position themselves for a lower carbon future. And interestingly, just on LinkedIn this week, I saw that they've just announced a lower carbon solutions business to sort of commercialize their emission reducing technology. So it is quite late, but they're getting in the game as well.
And even on that, they're focused on carbon reduction from their existing polluting technologies. They're not doing what some other people in this space are doing, is finding alternative energy sources. But the risk on that is they're losing the potential to lose market share because they're perceived as lagging behind. So people go with, in terms of customers and suppliers and staff even, they go to the forward-looking companies. And there's no differentiation in this space at all. If the agenda is important to customers, they're not seen as a player. And ultimately, that business model risks becoming obsolete.
Yeah. But positively, they're doing something. They're progressing as a business, and they're obviously they're limited in their R&D expenditure because they are trying things that someone's already done, and that's lower risk for the business in a lot of ways because there's already that they have knowledge of a customer market or a customer appetite for that. So there's short-term loss cost advantages for this company, and it's also progression along the continuum, which we like to see. So in terms of the next strategy, it's isolation, and this is where sustainability really starts to make some serious inroads, and you do see a lot of companies out there in an isolation mode or strategy place. It's entire business units, departments or locations that have got a really strategic mission or ethos or goal. They really try and drive genuine impact reduction by measuring things and displaying that, and there's usually some key innovations involved. So it's a really interesting space.
So in our desktop research, looking out there, Vernich Harry came up just because it's a great example of this visually from their website. So they have an eco range of cabins they provide. I don't know if it's at a premium, but I suspect it is. Meanwhile, the core products, just exactly what they were, always have been. And they're looking to see, I would imagine, again, I can't put words in their mouth, if that eco range becomes more popular and starts to take over, then their sustainability strategy is kind of done for them. So you can see the benefit of that approach. But in reality, any eco range that takes off needs to be at the same price point as the relevant original product, if that makes sense. And at that point, you start to really have a more credible offering. So strong strategy, and we'll talk about the pros and cons in a bit.
Yeah, so in isolation, H&M on the high street are doing some really good things. They have a whole range. It's growing in shelf and presence in store. But one really key characteristic of this strategy is that because there's a direct comparison, they often get exposed, and they have a lot of problems in terms of their reputation because you're not really sure what they're actually doing, and it's a direct comparison between the two ranges that they offer. So yeah, a good strategy and solid, and they get to test the market. So, and I can see H&M doing that in my own store. In terms of the energy and gas sector, BP has really got a compelling vision to go beyond petroleum, and they're working really hard on moving away from that. And they've developed a official division that's looking into EV charging providers, which is a really nice balance for them, and a whole sector that will hopefully grow as the oil and gas petroleum side reduces. But once again, they're still in a confused state, or a bit conflicted really, because they have been seen to be lobbying against environmental laws. So they've got feet in both camps when they're in this strategy.
So the negatives of this is that contradiction that Rondi was describing. So you've got, on the one hand, you're still trying to sustain that core business that isn't necessarily the best, and you risk that perception of greenwashing, and it can stall progress you'd make. If you put all your eggs in your eco range basket, then you kind of neglect the core business, and you're not developing your strategies in that side of the business to make things better and reduce those impacts. So if for any reason you drop the eco range, you're exactly where you were. You haven't progressed in core business.
But on a positive way, it's relatively easy to implement. You can use it as a test space. You can grow your market. You can understand it. You can analyze it. You can keep your costs, your profits all separate. So you can really have a good idea of if that market is right for you. Good customer and staff engagement, because you're showing that you're doing something. You've got an ability to innovate, and you actually are starting to make an impact, which is that whole circular economy and that circular feel good for, doing well for doing good. So it's a really nice solid strategy.
So the commitments where the rubber starts to meet the road, and you're actually, as it says on the tin, committing to being more sustainable. So you're building it into your strategies, you're building it into your decision making. You've got objectives which sit alongside your other business objectives. They're not something that are over on the side. And that's building that strong innovation culture, and it's a differentiator. So you're starting to stand out from the crowd because you're really doing it, and you're doing it properly. So in the construction side, construction impacts in many ways on both the environmental, social, and the economics, massive around the world. Lafarge is one of the big materials suppliers, and when you look around the materials suppliers, you see different things, but they're right up front. They've got their big sustainability impacts and pillars on their homepage, and when you dig into it, they're measuring a lot, and they're measuring it well. They're doing it by ton of material delivered. You can see they've got a commitment to get to net zero in line with UN goals. They've got targets in place. When it's going not so well, they're reporting it. They're not shy of that, and they're tracking what their competitors are doing. So we don't know in reality, is there a bit of greenwashing going on there? Can't tell, but from a desktop analysis, it's very convincing, and it looks good from the outside in, and you would like to believe that actually it's strong.
So in terms of commitment, Lego is a company that always comes up in terms of the companies that are really committed to sustainability, and not just because they can build a circular model with wind farms on them, but they're really strong on corporate responsibility. Desktop review wise, they've got some fantastic and long, they've been committed to this. They're showing what they're doing, they're showing their progress, and even when they're not progressing, they're still reporting it. So it's a really nice story. They're listening to their customers. There's stories of children writing in asking when the packaging is becoming more sustainable and more recyclable. So it's a really committed company, and I think all of their sites use renewable energy. They're all self-generated. It's taking it pretty seriously. In terms of commitment, American Fuel Company, according to Forbes, is the highest ranking oil and gas company in the world for sustainability. It's established biodiversity action plans years ago, and using all technological advances along all their supply chain to be the most sustainable that they can, and they're really, really delivering good product. What was interesting and what I liked about their website in terms of visibility and consistency and accountability is they have a really nice interactive website page which shows you all the sites and all the different things they're doing at all the different sites in terms of climate change or water, biodiversity. So it does seem from a desktop review that they're quite a committed oil and gas company.
So again, if you look at the positives of that side of things, it is that staff and customer engagement. When you're doing things and measuring them and genuinely reaching out and genuinely talking to them about striving to be better, that does bring them in and engage them so much better. And you get that innovation from the ideas that come from it. You are making impacts. Investors are certainly interested because they're looking to the future. You've got a future focus in your strategy by definition, and it does encourage business model innovation.
But by spending all this time on your commitment here, you can't spend it in other areas and being more competitive. It's a huge amount of communication to be a leading committed company here, and it's an opportunity for your competitors to pick up the slack where you're gaining traction and you're working on your sustainability agenda. Other competitors might come in with different topics that can catch you out.
So transformation it's almost like betting the house, but you are going for it. You are trying to change your market, and you're really putting all your commitments out there. You're looking to change consumer behaviors, change your competitor behavior even. You're looking to move things forward, and you have to be really networked to make this happen. You're looking at the overall system because you need some structural things to change for that market to shift with you. So there's definitely a timing aspect to this as well for it to be successful. The construction example in the States, a company called Katerra, and they are doing everything. People talk in the UK about modern methods of construction and digitization. There's a lot of lip service to it, but they are doing it. They've got factory manufacture. They're using cross-laminated timber. And interesting that they've had a bit of a rocky ride. They seem to be pushing through it now because it's just a different way of approaching the market, and people aren't used to it and probably uncomfortable with it. So it's hard for them to gain traction.
In terms of transformation, we really think IKEA is a transformational company. I'm not 100% convinced they've transformed wholly in sustainability, but they transformed the flat pack market. So I have every hope that they will be transformed in sustainability. But they are really addressing and measuring and managing and reporting and communicating and being visible on all fronts. They're really conscious of the food they serve and the sites they grow on, their employees, their raw materials, their supply chain, and even the loop that is really difficult for other suppliers. They're pushing hard on is it's the end use of their product and bringing it back and recycling it in secondhand stores that are associated with IKEA for their products. So it's the whole circular economy. So they're really making some great inroads there. In terms of oil and gas, this is a company that I'd never heard of before until we started doing it. It's a Danish company, and they, in the last 10 years, they have 100% divested of all fuel and oil, all of the fuel and oil production, and moved directly into renewable energy. They're ranked #1 for the best energy company in the world, or most sustainable energy company in the world. And they've really transformed their whole business and are doing a great job. So it's not heard of, which is really an interesting thing. And when we look at the grid, you'll see there's a pattern a bit later. So negatives. In terms of the negatives, it's a huge amount of communication to be a transformational company, because you are really educating customers, suppliers, employers, the whole sector, and you're shifting mindsets. In terms of accountability, you need to be lily white. You can't, on all of your credentials. Any reputational blips in this sector are going to have a magnified effect, because if you're calling out everything you do as transformation, and sometimes the market's not ready for the product you can offer at the price you can offer it, or with the criteria. Maybe there's a certain level of recycling you need to do around your waste materials. So yeah, there's a few challenges in this area, and probably that's why we don't see a lot of companies there yet.
So the big pluses are the potential for that market leadership position. And if you get your timing right, you can steal a huge chunk of market share. And the network effect is quite strong because you're normally in quite a righteous position and people want to join in and they want to help you and support you. And because you need to make structural changes in your market, people are joined in, you get the benefit of that network in terms of promoting your brand. Staff want to work with you, customers want to work with you. Everything you're doing is innovative and you're having positive impacts and investors love it. And you've got, by definition, you've got that future focus and a really strong innovation culture, and your business model probably is innovative as well. So there's lots to be said for it, but timing is so important and execution is hard. So it is a high risk strategy for sure.
So we put a grid together of all the companies that we discussed, and it was really an interesting one because as you look down to the lip service, they're quite familiar names, but moving through the strategies, they become less familiar names to us or off the. So it's an interesting, very, very high level assessment of where companies are sitting on their strategies and perhaps the way it's shifting.
And one of the questions we've had in actually was regarding where a particular sector is in terms of, so sectors aren't on a strategy, the companies within it are all on a different place. So it's not about what's that sector doing, how sustainable is the sector, it's where the different companies within that sector are positioning themselves and what opportunities they have. So in terms of summarizing where we are with the strategies, you've got to kind of stick your colors to the mast and decide where you are, and you do have to progress. It's not so much preachy, that's just the state of every market is starting to ask these questions. We would certainly suggest you need to be transparent. So greenwash is very frowned upon. There's lots of bad PR around that. So whatever you are doing, be honest about it and let people see what you're at. That visibility piece of the targets you have and what you're trying to do does go down well. That genuine honesty of here's where we are, but here's where we're going, and these are the plans we have in place, regardless of whether you're at lip service or you're right up the other end, is really important. And you have to be consistent in what you put out there. If you're going to start measuring something and you publish it once, you got to keep going, whether the news is good, bad or ugly, but make sure you've got the stories to go with it so people understand you're in progress, because everybody is in progress and everybody's developing.
So yeah, I think in terms of sustainability, we really see it as an adapt or die sort of scenario. A few brands that everyone knows don't exist anymore, and they missed the boat, and we believe that sustainability is something that it's a boat you have to get in and start rowing towards a more sustainable business model for your company.
So just in terms of what we offer and how it fits in with this, Basecamp is around understanding your impacts and where you are and creating an action plan to progress. So it really is getting kicked off, and generally that will apply around the first three sectors. Journey is where you're starting to become more committed and you're actually, you know, your impacts, you're setting targets, you're publishing how you're getting on and sharing those stories. And Summit is the transformation play. So just we do have time for one question that came in, just about 2 minutes left to go. And one of the questions was looking at Me Too, where does the continuous improvement fit in? Good question. So with Me Too, you're probably not too committed to continuous improvement, and most businesses are in that camp, and there's nothing wrong with it as a strategy. And if the market's not ready for it and you can't make the play without giving yourself a competitive disadvantage, well, you're not going to do it, and we wouldn't suggest you should do it. It's around making the plays that you got to keep the cash coming in, you got to stay profitable, you got to stay competitive. So it's finding those opportunities that don't disadvantage you. Some people may be prepared to make that longer term pitch.
We have a saying, don't we, Nick? It's if sustainability costs you more, you're doing it wrong. And yeah. So we really believe that being more sustainable is a continuous improvement plan. So it's just improving and doing it for the right business reasons for you. So.
And in all the client workshops we've done to date, we haven't found an occasion where there isn't positive things people can be doing, which are heading them towards a commitment stage and making them money. And I think that's absolutely key. You are going to get more traction in your business and in your market if you can do it without giving yourself a cost disadvantage. So on that note, I think we're right up to our half hour. So once again, thanks everybody for attending. Hope it's been useful.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Okay, we shall turn you off now, and we will send a survey out. So if you could give us feedback so as we can make these better on the continuous improvement front, that would be really appreciated.
Thanks very much.